Hey folks, welcome to the Soil Network podcast, formerly Combines and Coffee. We've rebranded, but one thing hasn't changed. Real conversations about farming, soil health, and making every acre count. Today, we're coming to you from Brant County, Ontario, a place where farming isn't just work, it's a way of life. I'm joined by Steve, Gord, Doug, and Lammert, who are rethinking how they farm from the ground up. We're talking no-till, cover crops, and how small changes can make a big difference. Expect real stories, honest challenges, and maybe a few surprises along the way. Whether you're driving the back roads or catching a break, thanks for tuning in. Welcome to the Soil Network podcast. Let's dig in.
Hi, my name is Ian Virtue, and welcome to the Soil Network podcast. I'm here today with Steve, Gord, Lammert, and Doug. We're just going to have an open, honest, candid conversation and talk about farming in southwestern Ontario. To get started, I'd like you guys to just introduce yourselves. Steve, let's get started with you.
A farm, I guess, a couple miles west of here. We're all in the same neighborhood. I have 25 beef cows and corn, soybeans, wheat, and edible beans. Used to be full tillage. Now I'm all no-till plant grain, concerned about the soil and keeping it on my farm and less disturbance. And now I'm farming more livestock below the ground that I'm aware of.
Awesome. Gord.
Yeah, so Gord and Alblas. I farm here where we are today. Farm with my parents and my wife and children. We milk about 60 cows and on about 230, 250 acres. That's corn, beans, wheat. We feed rye for silage, and we do a little bit of alfalfa. Yeah. Seems to be keep getting less every year. Main focus of the farm would be feed for livestock, with quality feed to feed cows, healthy cows, and turn healthy milk. The main focus for all of that, I believe, is soil. So anything that's good for the soil, I feel, is good down the line. At my extremes, focus.
We have a family farm down the road here too. We farm 500 acres. We are 20 years organic certified. We got inspired by Gary Zimmer and Elaine Ingham from the Food Network already 20 years ago. That soil is really important. And Gary started us a little bit into the kind of a semi-organic way of doing things. And that's how we got rolling, and really went out for 20 years. And every year it seems to get a little bit better. Main focus is pasture.
Excellent. And Doug.
My name is Doug Donkers, and I'm also a local farmer. And we milk about 160 cows and farm maybe 400 acres. And in 2011 was when I started my farming career with my dad and my uncle quit farming together, and we took over. So with some new debt loads, I was chasing down some efficiencies. So first we started in the barn because that was our main gig. And as times change and things start rolling good, you look for new opportunities. And I'm always the kind of person who likes chasing efficiencies down. So after we built a new barn in 2018, my chase kind of went to the field when we started some double cropping, and really liked how that was working. And then now has changed more into soil health because I'm still looking for a bit of an efficiency or change. So that's been the focus the last couple of years, and not ready to give up on it yet. And it's been going good, but that's where we're currently at. So looking forward to more things to come, but here we are.
Awesome. I want to dive into your soil health journey a little bit more. We're going to dive into each of yours, but I'm curious, what you mentioned efficiencies is what got you started. Will you tell me, what was that initial moment for you, and how did it lead you into soil health?
Well, we started in our dairy, we were a typical dairy, alfalfa. We don't have any pasture, but I think it might be coming back again. So we were alfalfa, corn silage, the typical dairy rations. And we tried some cereal rye one fall, and most of the time I'm an all or nothing person, so it's like we change everything or we don't change nothing. But I kind of did a little bit it was a bit weird. And we planted 100 acres. We harvested for forage next year. We filled up a bunk. It was good, no complaints. Got our soybeans planted right away. A little bit of those acres went to corn, the rest went to soybeans, and we started feeding that rye in the summertime. And we literally subbed the alfalfa out into rye and noticed no difference in our barn. We had the same milk output. We had the same milk output and the same protein needs going into the cows. It was literally just sub one in and one out. And that So I was pretty happy with that. And I was curious about, as the summer went on, as we got some yield drags because of the double crops, because we planted later. And by the time our harvest came along the soybean, or in the fall, our silage, well, we don't weigh it because it's all for corn silage, but I would say it was very comparable. But the soybeans were, I think it was 1 bushel better on our double crop, which then it was an aha moment for me. I'm like, this is the best thing ever. We're getting way more efficient use of our land. So then the next year, naturally, we did everything because I was chasing down this efficiency. And so, yeah, that's kind of where it went. So, but then it turned from like, hey, now we have these, like, ultimately what we learned is we just learned how to use the sunshine better. So we just learned to use the sun in the cooler times of the year to produce a crop. That's essentially what we did, better photosynthesis use. So now it's, that was what I think I've learned was increasing like photosynthesis quantity, which was great because we used the sun for more time of the year, but now we're trying to chase down the angle of photosynthesis quality. I did say quantity first, right? Yeah, this is photosynthesis quality to get our plant Brix levels higher so we can actually give more to the soil microbiome. That is the angle that we're chasing down. Haven't been successful yet as what I wanted, but I think we have some good angles for next year. So
I noticed you looked over at Gordon when you said that. You were like, we have some good angles for next year. Are you guys working on the same problems?
Often.
Or we're like,
It's a good thing we have unlimited calling hours. Tractor to tractor chats this spring happened for quite some time.
daily.
And it's daily. What are we doing? I don't know. How much we put on? No clue. Oh, what do you think about this? Nah, sounds good. So it was a little bit of trial and error this year for sure, and we'll continue. It led myself to buy in a sprayer, my own sprayer, so I could control what went in it, opposed to having a custom spray, which for my size is kind of an overkill and an extra job, but it has been a very useful thing.
You guys do a lousy job, any.
Steve here told me years ago, and I finally listened to him, to get my own sprayer. So kudos to Steve for telling me, I don't know how many years ago already, you need to get your own sprayer.
I sprayed.
Yeah, it's sitting in my pile.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? You said it was like kind of back and forth, perpetual problem solving. Can you tell me a little bit more detail about what exactly you were trialing and erroring?
Lammert mentioned earlier about Elaine Ingham. Started kind of last September, so a year and a bit ago. I listened to a 4-part webinar from Green Covers with Dr. Christine Jones. Dr. Christine Jones has a lot of research into the soil microbiome and how the rhizosphere works around the roots. And I was blown away by the information she was sharing. I went, I said to Doug, I said, what do you think of this? He listened to it and went, that's cool. And that allowed both of us to dive deeper, which I'll give my hat off. Doug dived a lot deeper than I did into listening to a lot of podcasts from the Regenerate podcast from John Kemp. That led to more questions and answers some days. And so, yeah, we would bounce ideas off. Well, did you catch this from it? Or did you catch that from it? And led us to try it. So we had to start somewhere. Did we do it right? Not totally. Did we do it wrong? I don't think so. We had a good year on that.
we had some successes for sure. Some fails, but some successes.
None of them were bank fails, though. Like, none of them were so much of a failure that the bank accounts really suffered for it. It's just could have been better.
Could have been better. How about your year?
Hey, we had
Regards to soil health.
Yep, soil health. We are our challenge is as an organic farmer that we cannot use nitrogen. Anything grows on nitrogen, especially grass, pastures. Everything needs a lot of nitrogen. So for us, the trick is to capture as much as possible nitrogen from air, from manure, from compost, and try to get azobacter active in your soil. Apparently, azobacter bacteria can bring up to 100 pounds per acre on nitrogen, maybe plus some green manure, plus compost. So all our efforts are focused on capturing as much as possible nitrogen to have maximum growth on our fields.
Now, what do you think you've learned from these guys here when it comes to capturing nitrogen? Like, have they been instrumental in that or debatable?
They're conventional farmers, right? So it's already better.
I think he's happy with what he's doing.
So Lammert's dragged along with this because he's the one that we got the ball started for some of us. I got challenged years ago by Lammert to keep the fields covered green, and that led to chopping up for forage, which led to neighbors watching, which I think that's kind of how it went, right? Kind of.
Tell me more about that. About what? That initial exchange. Like you saw him and you led Gordon to do something different.
Well, you ask him. I don't know. We just do our thing, and it takes a little bit of a maybe. What does it take?
Well, Lammert told me one time to buy an old drill. It doesn't cost you very much. You get a couple $100 off a Kajit. Put some rye seed in it and pull it across the field, and you'll get a cover crop and keep that field green. So we did it for a couple of years, and one year we harvested a little bit of it. I said, it looks like heifer feed, but the feed nutritionist didn't really like the stuff, as it doesn't test really high on a feed test. And then there was a couple of years it was just an extra job, so it didn't get done. I didn't really like how the soil looked after that, but in 2019 we had a terribly wet spring, and I thankfully had the cover crop in the fall of rye. And that summer we had we had a lot of rain and spray. We didn't get planted until June, but there was no compaction marks from spreading manure. And it was just this down at that time. It was about knee high or waist high by the time I got to it. That's kind of nice. We don't have the compaction from it there. You held the soil where it's supposed to. This looks like could be good feed too. So the next year we grew it to mow it. That's kind of how that got started. I think Lammert's been more of a source of information than necessarily we've been able to hand back that I've seen, but
Split my field last week.
Thanks. What do you typically do to try to help nitrogen sequestration from the air? Like, is there anything special you try to go for?
We tried every year. We try a lot of stuff, and we tried 1 year annual ryegrass, and that was a disaster because annual ryegrass is a nitrogen feed like big time. So what we do is we start with quite a bit of alfalfa and clover when we start a new field, and by grazing the red clover and alfalfa disappears. But I do supply quite a bit of nitrogen for the ryegrass and all the other grass you plant. So as the time goes on, you come into the 4th year of grazing, we don't see any nitrogen deficiency in the grass. But I think we start up with quite a bit of legumes in the planting, like 15 pounds of alfalfa and 5 pounds of clover, plus 20 pounds of grass.
go on.
So when it's a lot of seed, but you need that nitrogen in order to get grass growing. If you just plant grass, it gets yellow as anything. It doesn't yield. Cows don't like it. They start sprouting. It's garbage.
Gordon and I were lucky enough to go to Lammert's for a tour this fall on his farm, and I told Gord that I would have been plenty happy to take his corn home with me. Like, for organic corn, I would have been more than happy if that was in my bunk. So I feel like the results you get are decent, because that was pretty nice corn you had there.
Steve, what are your thoughts?
On what?
Oh, what?
You get chuckled really. God, another one.
So Lammert has clearly played a key role, at least for Gordon and Doug. Would you say you played a key role in your adoption of
The third wheel, this third wheel.
No, he's not.
Well, tell me about your soil health journey. It all comes back to the river for you and preventing things from flowing into the river, keeping our water quality healthy. Is that really where it started for you, or?
Yeah, there was a few ha-ha moments, but it's still a struggle today as your soil health gets better. This year was the year of the slug for me. And I'm still, and it could be even worse next year if we don't get winter, because it seems like winter's the one thing that's going to get rid of slugs. And we've got a huge crop of biomass to get rid of, which is going to insulate the soil even better. So we're not going to freeze them as well if we don't get a real winter. Redoing planting twice and still getting the same result of no things coming up makes me go, what do I need to do different? What in my soil's out of whack that my slugs are having such a heyday? And I know these guys helped me in a little bit in that I put it out there on Twitter back in the spring. What's wrong? Why do I have slugs, and what do I stop it with? Well, it turns out I think it was John Kemp, through these guys, put some iron on. I didn't have time to do homework and experiment with it. It's like all in. And the price was right. I was spreading slug bait at $50 an acre. Chelated iron was $10 an acre plus the sprayer pass. It's like, well, that's a no-brainer. Let's try it. And within 2 days, my slugs stopped eating my crop. The challenge is, how do you get that crop? How do you get from the planting stage to have a crop there that's going to take in that chelated iron? So I'm going to bridge that gap with a cover crop, I hope. Make sure
Is it direct contact for the iron, or is it actually?
it gets into the plant, the The slug doesn't like to eat it. It doesn't taste like because it's higher in iron.
Yeah, and the slugs don't have blood. It's
The fluid
system is different.
Yeah, they're a different beast. They're a mollusk.
For that reason, 10 years ago, when we did cover crops, we decided not to do cover crops. We doubled cover crop actually after our crop come off, because for that reason we do not want not too much, and because they also get woody. We're in the nitrogen business, so
Right.
if
Carbon's a bad thing.
carbon somewhat, but like wood chips and it's hard carbon, so it's more fungal food than it is bacterial food. So if you leave too much woody stuff, we feel that we get a drag on the nitrogen in the spring. So after our rye comes off, we plant buckwheat. We run the disc over once, plant buckwheat, and we let it grow for 6 weeks, and then because then all the volunteer rye and wheat will get killed again, and then we plant oats. And the oats, we have a magical date. It's the 20th of September. This seems to, like we plant before the 15th of September, it goes flat. And I want that because it insulates, and you got the woody stuff. But 20th, between the 15th and the 20th, you get about a foot long oats, and it dies over the winter. So that the disadvantage is in the spring that you will have a bare field, and that's the consequences of. But then there's still enough root mass in my opinion, that it won't wash away, but you will have a little bit of oxidation from the sun in March and April. So that's we find that if the roots die on the oats, that we find, I think, that's not even that's just my opinion. It's not maybe wise to say, but I think the roots die in the corn plant, it goes into the root channels of the oats. And like we have to disc in the spring, in anything that's alive on clay, it smears, and I find that the corn doesn't ever go fast. So that's because we're on clay, and like
It's nice clay.
but it is, yeah, but it just smears, and we have not been in the organic, like the spring is totally different. In the spring you can just get rid of your rye just by, but we have to disc it. We have tried often enough, and we were not successful growing a decent crop after rye. Beans we do.
And yet this year, my best corn was on a field of rye that was as high as this table. It hadn't gone to head yet, and I had chicken manure on it last fall.
But you didn't disc it.
No, I told it to
No-till it, yeah.
and then killed it after I planted, and then it had some volunteer azukis in it, and I let them go, and they made seed, and there's a new crop for next year. But that was my best corn by far. It's like I did it all wrong.
I don't know why do you think it's wrong?
Well, in here, like you said, you can't grow corn after rye.
It has only to do with the disking, though.
No, but it's
Ours it does anyway.
but it's after rye, and it's no-tilled, and it's planted green, and
That's perfect.
I feel like the more you learn in the soil health journey,
you kind of go.
when you start getting the good knowledge, the more you know, the more you have no idea.
Well, and I want to replicate that again, to a point.
It's a good strategy.
Like I'm wondering, maybe I need some legume in there underneath that's going to come up through and just stay there, kind of this big, feeding the corn.
But if in the spring you spray it off, which is because then the stalks takes, so the carbon it takes longer for the carbon goes down. Like if you disc it down in the spring, all that woody carbon goes into the soil and it takes your nitrogen away. You want better to leave it standing on corn.
And the guy we're going to see on Thursday, Friday, he's a proponent of working your cover crop in.
Sorry?
Well, that Graham C. They're going.
Yeah.
They like a little bit of tillage sometimes to get into the microbes.
In the fall,
Okay.
not in the spring.
Yeah, fair. That would make sense.
In the fall. Yeah. So that's when I told Gord Doc this week, like you gotta work that fall crop in a little bit to stay at green. But if you have all the seeds, and you plant for next spring, that's not ideal. It's way too much competition. Take an extra run that's pretty.
That cornfield was almost too bare when I combined it. Like it was bare as that floor.
Yeah.
Like all the rye's gone and there's nothing there.
Well, the worms ate.
Exactly.
Yeah, it probably looks like it's tilled too because all the worm castings laying on top.
Yeah, and it's nice mellow soil, but
Oh,
But you would not, I don't think you would have the same result if you had in the spring run a disc over, because then all that hard carbon, all that woody carbon takes nitrogen away from your corn.
It's probably. Yep. So we getting back to your question earlier about Steve. Steve has kind of been the mentor of Doug and I.
Mm-hmm.
And years ago, it happened that I mentioned earlier about our rye crop we harvested for forage. It was so thick, the root balls afterwards, I couldn't get the disc through it. Sorry, that guy's. There's only one person that's got the emergency contact, an emergency ring through, and that's who that is. So we'll leave that. It's over there. You can look after it.
Okay.
She knows where I am.
I'll let you start from the beginning there.
Yeah. So years ago, Steve helped us out quite a bit, and that kind of led us down our journey. Was we were having trouble with this rye because I tried to disc it to plant it with Doug's planter. So Doug, I rent Doug's planter, and it's a conventional planter, but it's a concert planter that can go through heavy residue, but technically not really a no-till planter. And as Steve suggested, he said, just plant it. Just put the seed in there, check to make sure you're going to depth,
And closing the trench.
and closing the trench and plant it. So we did. It worked. It wasn't perfect, but it got us enough that Doug realized that his planter could do it. That was one part of it. And it kind of led us to doing some planter modifications, again, because Steve's suggestions. Actually, not quite yet. No, next year we went and put planter full of sandbags in the insecticide boxes.
So couldn't keep it in the ground.
Because we couldn't keep it in the ground. But we figured we were going to keep some weight on it to get it through the rye. And that worked-ish, but on some of the hills it didn't really work. And Steve came up with the idea that the geometry probably is not quite right of where we were putting the weight as opposed to where the entry point of the disc opener is.
It's binding.
So
Geometry.
So he suggested we go and put some money into a downforcer system.
There is a reason why I sold that planter.
Yeah, I should mention that was Steve's old plant. That's why part of the reason I called him, but the other part was to get him to plant for me.
Steve wanted it.
And he didn't want to plant it. He told me to go and plant it without plant.
There's no sense me planting when your planter will do.
After 10 years, Gordon thought we should get a refund.
So
With it.
well, anyway, what came of that was that a number of modifications came to it, and that kind of went with going back to Doug. He said, "Hey, Doug, I think we should put this on your planter. I think it would be valuable," and that has led us down a whole lot of additions to a planter. With the whole plan of being able to plant, technically it's green, into harvested cereal rye sweets, and they are bound together as tight as your lawn, because we're planted at a high seeding rate to get the forage.
So why do you spray
Usually right after planting or just after. A little bit of green.
on the rye?
Yeah. And like this year too,
A week after planting or so.
Yeah,
and not even.
before it comes up, like between planting and emerge.
It's easier to cut living roots than dead roots.
Yeah, that comes from Steve. And you also told me one year to keep the manure on top and don't put work your manure in down below by your seed, which was something foreign to me because best management practices is to work your manure in. But now your seed is in contact with manure.
What kind of manure?
Fresh. Not the stuff you should be putting. Right?
Not on the seed.
Well, and if you got a good, healthy soil, that manure is getting incorporated with all your livestock.
So we learned. And Steve was willing to take his time out of the day to come and walk the field with us a couple of times. Because it didn't look perfectly pretty the first year, but it's gotten.
Steve has been like pretty iconic for us too, because like you've been cover cropping for quite a long time, and it was probably 10 years ago I started with some corn silage for you, and Steve farms in some pretty big dills, so understandably why he wants to keep the soil there. But I remember the first time we did it, I think I counted 250 corn plants in a row. My jaw was pretty much dropped that day in the harvester, like wondering why every single corn plant was there, until I was waiting for a wagon and out counting to see how many. And I think I got around 250, like before a skip or a double of like very even corn stand. It was pretty good. So I think that's what started, like Steve was pretty influential to us that way of like, hey, maybe there's something to these good plant stands. And that was pretty early on.
Yeah, it was all no-till because I had to chop one year when your harvester blew out. Yeah, and I remember looking at this stuff. There was oat residue laying on top. It was up by the river there.
Yeah.
It was in actually a slug replant.
Always a favorite. Yep.
in there, and I was looking at that going, that's no-till. You can get corn like that, no-till. I wish my corn looked that good, and I put a lot of time and effort into full tillage to get it.
I think I was ready. Gord does Steve's corn now all the time, but I was probably ready to give it up even a few years before that I did. And but every time I did it, I would kind of be dreading it on the way there. But on the way home, I was so impressed with how good his corn was and how nice that soil was. I was pretty thankful. I kept doing the job.
Why were you dreading it?
They're really big hills. You just got to play it safe. And back
Dreading that way up.
back in the day, I used to pull the wagons back.
I know I'm an asshole, but not you. It's not you.
You have to be really, really careful. Like play those fields right. And like we don't farm on big hills like that. And towing the wagon behind the harvester, like usually that rear axle is light on the harvester, you could get yourself into a pinch pretty easy. So for those reasons, like I was like usually happy I didn't break nothing on the job. I felt like I was anyways, it was a good experience. But every time I left, I was thankful because that soil was so nice every time.
Well, the last time you came, it was 3/4 an inch the night before, and it's like, I was reluctant to do it.
And the soil was beautiful.
It carried.
It was beautiful. Barely left a mark.
Hill tracks, and the Sierra Rye came up on those wheel tracks, no problem.
And I think that field, if I remember right, you would use chicken litter as your main nitrogen source. I think it didn't have a whole lot of nitrogen on that field either, did it not?
It would have got wide drops some late season, but yes, it would have been 5 ton of poultry manure up front. But on a cover crop or the fall before.
But pretty beautiful corn stands, good corn, no complaints. Happy to take the corn home. So let's take everyone's corn home.
Yes, we're gonna go. When there's corn missing, you know where. So what I'm seeing here are just these like layers of trust between each of you through like trial and error, through experiences that have worked and have failed. You know, sometimes Steve may come to Gordon with information. Sometimes it works out, maybe sometimes it doesn't. Can you guys tell me a little bit about how you like maintain that level of trust when you're problem solving in an area that is so up in the air at times? Like it's sometimes the advice you get may work, sometimes it doesn't. How do you guys make sure that it's like you still know that you guys are there for each other?
Farm by the road where everybody can see what you're doing, get free advice. People driving by, what the did you do around there?
We all fail.
I guess for myself, like Steve does the custom work for a neighboring farm, and it always looked better. And he's actually beside you too, like for Owen. And it always really looked good. And then when someone does a really good job and does it a little different than everybody else, you start noticing a little bit more. I would say that's part of it. I don't know, we're trying not to be too judgmental of the other guy, and if it is constructive criticism.
Yeah, like failing sucks, no doubt, but failing is humbling.
Yep.
Because that keeps you from knowing all the answers.
Well, you gotta learn, keep learning.
So, and I feel like the soil health strategy is growing for sure, but it's a bit of an uphill battle. Some days you need to have people you can talk to because you need that backup, and
you still gotta pay the bills.
You still gotta pay the bills, which is it has to be sustainable on all levels. So yeah, like I said, failing it can be humbling, and I think that's how it keeps you in check of debating with each other ideas. It's funny. I had started listening to one day I was on YouTube this summer, and the post came up about like what the weeds tell you, and all the weeds want to tell you something about what's going on. And so I kind of heard about it before, so I clicked on it. It was from a new guy I never heard about, Glenn Ravenberg. And so I listened to it, and he's pretty comical. It was pretty good listening. And naturally, I dug a little deeper because there's something I haven't heard about. And he often talks about the calcium link. And I called up Gord after that, and I was like, hey, like, this is just after not getting some results I wanted this summer. I'm like, maybe this has something to do with it. And then I was telling Gord about it. At the end of the conversation, Gord said, you know what? That's what Lammert's told me this whole time. So sometimes it's kind of hard because it's hard sometimes to open your mind up to take suggestions. Right. So, but yeah, it can be a real deal. So then this fall, Lammert called me one day and said, I had this nice multi-species for the first time growing along the roadside. And he said, you should work some of that up just to strip and test it. And like natural me was like, no, not a chance. But then you know what? I like too many humbling things this summer. So I called Gord up. He has his district. I'm like, Lammert suggests we do this. We'll do it tomorrow. So we did. So we're taking the advice. But yeah, it's a lot of back and forth. It's got to be. I feel like there's no ground rules about it. But if there was, the first thing should be like try to have respect, even in the ups and downs.
And you're never too smart.
Enough of that stuff.
No, you're never too smart.
So back to that working, is grazing the same as working it?
Probably. You tramp down so that the microbes have access to your nitrogen. They tie it up.
Yeah.
And we spread no manure in the spring. Zero.
Well,
Never.
wow, but a bunch of it's packed, or is it composted, or?
Everything is compost, but we don't think we should spread manure in the spring because it's composted manure comes slowly available. If you put raw manure in the fall, and gets sucked up by your cover crop, goes into the roots and comes slowly available the year after. It's kind of the same thing as you had with your rye. Because it's standing, falls over later. It has a nice slow release of your nutrients. Mm-hmm. If you put a lot of liquid manure on in the spring, especially liquid or raw manure, but raw manure is even, in fact, raw manure is probably the worst thing to put on in the spring, in my opinion. Liquid manure has its benefits because it's fast available, so the plant will suck it up the cow time. But it also gives a rather unhealthy release of nutrients.
Are you spreading any raw manure in the fall?
A little bit. That's a little less possible.
Steve, I'd like to punt this over to you for a second. Speaking to Gord over the summer, you mentioned just like the role that you played in like his farming journey, and like when it comes to somebody who he knows he can go to with a bunch of experience, like it's been you to many degrees. Can you tell me what it means to you to like helping out the younger guys, like especially in your community and just across the areas, and why is that something that's important to you, and what do you hope that they take away?
I thought you would. I don't know if I'm the oldest guy here. Well, it's humbling, but raise your standards, because I fail too, and I still got to learn. It's nice to be able to help other people and be part of the journey, because when I was younger, I was looking up to other people too, and if you just keep your cards close to your chest, you're not helping anybody out. You got to work with the community and play with the community.
It usually comes back in a roundabout way too.
Yep.
Like if you help someone out, usually some point down the road you get some help back.
It motivates to them. Like for me anyway, like when you help the younger generation, they're a little bit more energetic, so it roughs up a little bit. So
and I feel like that's the same with the successes. As we find successes, you don't be like, hey, I'm keeping that for my one up for next year. But if you share it, it's we can all propel together. Like the fastest gains are made basically by everyone trying things and sharing the results. Because then
you try this, because we've only got so many. Yeah. It takes a year to get results.
Yeah.
Each cropping year, and we've only got so many cropping years in us.
Right.
Yeah. So the gains get sped up by sharing info.
it's not like a Maple Leafs maybe next year.
Right. And staying optimistic.
Well, look, if you're feeding pigs, you got 3 months.
Yeah.
4 months to turn a pig. For a crop, that's a year. It doesn't. It's slow learning. And then if you've got a failure year,
It's too dry and nothing works.
yep, or too wet, or vice versa. It's just
We do. Oh, you should maybe mention, we farm quite a diverse land,
Yeah.
soil types. Steve's on some ground that it's dry most of the year.
stony. That's what.
Right.
And sandy. And I've got some stuff that before, when I used to do a lot of tillage, if you walked out there on a wet day, you got about 2-inch thicker boots when you were done. All the way to Lammert's got some of both. And I know that now because I own next to them now, but it didn't used to. But that ground is a nice loam, almost can do no wrong sometimes. It's a field. You can still mess that. And then we got everything in between that. So,
But you've made it more like my soil with the way you treat it healthier.
absolutely.
It's amazing. It's amazing, like, what happens. My brother had purchased a farm a few years ago that we rent from him. And I was lucky enough as a kid to have been on a farm that's, as I put it, subsidized with manure. And that's all I knew. I just knew good land. I just knew you could plant a seed and it would just grow and you just get a good harvest. And that's the way life worked.
With easy, but
Yeah, it was like, it didn't matter what you did. Like I'd seen one crop failure in my life on farm up like some. Anyways, we started renting this field for my brother, and I am not a professional farmer. So of course I had standardized treatments. I had the same thing over there, but like dramatically different results. And the soil is so hard over there. And every time you get a rain, like even if you have like a basin of land that's maybe like 6 or 7 acres that gently rolling, they would have washouts in there. And I couldn't understand in my head why this would happen, because it just doesn't make sense. It makes a bit more sense to me now. But that was also one of the aha moments in my life of like, hey, like it's management practices, or we have to think about something biological too, because like the soils aren't that different, but they're very different. Like they're just how they've been managed. And so anyways, on our farm, like I said, we could go through in 2012, we had a really dry summer, and I think we have a 207 bushel corn average in our farm. And at 680, we sold it for that summer. We bought a paler with part of the corn proceeds. Where if that same thing happened at my brother's place just around the corner here, I probably would have moved on for crop insurance. I did the same, which we don't buy. But we did the same treatments, like, and so I just, yeah, the knowledge share is important too, but like dramatic differences can happen.
Sometimes the knowledge share isn't just sometimes it's just observing.
Yeah.
Right? You observe. Sometimes you do a little trespassing, you go for a little walk, and you see how it's done, and sometimes you tell them, sometimes you just leave it at that. And there's a lot to be said to be farming in the same community with you, and not just keep everything to yourself.
And sometimes it's trespassing the other way. You think you're wasting your time, and then you go trespassing on the other side that's been back to the way you used to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we are ahead of the game here.
I've had that this past year. We had some huge rain events, and my side of the road, which is actually lower than the other side,
Right.
didn't have the ponding in the field. And the other side of the road was washing out onto the road 3 times in 1 week. And it's not, soil type doesn't change that much crossing the rain.
That's when the grass is not green on this side, but
That was a big case of not green on the other side. And that is all things that I've seen improve drastically with no-till. And that no-till,
But it's not just
not just no-till, no, but a lot of the encouragement to go no-till and the confidence to do so came from peer-to-peer out.
Yeah.
The confidence to do so, because for 2020, I was never going to no-till corn. It just was something I always seen as a very poor practice that didn't look like something to do. But Steve had some good results. That's why I was going to try to get Steve to plant for me in 2020. And he's, oh, you can do it without a planter. And that led down to,
There you are.
and told me what to look for. Like, not just, you can do it, right? And leave you to it. No, you got to do this, this, and this. You got to look for. This is probably how you have to set it.
Yeah.
And then willing it.
Not the first time I've said that. I was in a planting for another neighbor, and I planted in one field, and I could see his planter planting in another field, and I could see 2 or 3 things wrong with it. Said, change this, this, and this. Now you got another field to plant. I don't need to plant it. You go plant it. And he did, and it worked. So that's where part of this community thing, I don't need to. I got enough work.
It's offloading work.
Yeah. I'm offloading, but I'm also helping the guy with his wallet. It's like, you got the equipment. Just to equip him so he can do it himself. And that'll come back.
I teach a man to fish, right?
Yep, exactly. Yep.
You guys keep talking about these aha moments. I'm curious if there's any standout aha moments you've had from each other. So, Gordon, it could be maybe something that Steve from taught you that like still sticks with you, or Lammert could be with Doug or Steve or Gordon. I want to open the floor. Whatever you guys think, I'd love to hear about these aha moments.
we'll do the first one with one time, a long time ago. So back before Gordy rented the corn planter, like I would plant it. And then we got way too busy in our barn. And so then Gord would do it with our planter. And I was half scared to plant because they would cultivate the clay and it was like lumps, and honestly, it was good I planted in the dark, but like the balls of clay. And like, I honestly had no idea how this corn would germinate. And so then whenever we were too busy and Gord started doing it, I felt a little bit relieved. Like, didn't even care about the income of the planter because I just didn't feel on the hook. Anyways, the first time you were graduating Ridgetown and you were going to your graduation, and I was planting right beside your house here, and you came out and you picked up, this is before I knew anything about rye, and Gord had this root ball of rye, and he's like, look at all the roots in here, and pretty rude comment I kind of made, and I was to myself, I'm like, it didn't mean nothing to me.
Well, I was taken back by this stuff. Actually, it was a cereal rye crop that we could put in for emergency feed. And I'd never grown it before. I got like next to no feed off of it because I cut it way too soon. Probably didn't even plant it heavy enough. I don't even know. It was something I tried. I pulled the cultivator through it, and it took a lot of diesel just to pull through it. But I remember picking it up, and I'm used to the mud balls. But this time it was like just roots. Like you pick up this dirt, and it was dirt and roots. It was almost like a 50-50. And that's what I remember of it. Doug's remembers a part of it.
But so like the aha moment took like a few years.
Right. Yeah.
But it did come. Like it distinctly stands out in my mind now. And then my father-in-law farms on clay similar to what Gord has. And a few years ago, he was over visiting and I was opening up Gord's cornfield for him. And I was like, oh, I was really trying to promote cover cropping to him because it's a hard sell. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. Let's go to Gord's cornfield. And we took it out and he was really impressed with the corn flowing in the harvester quickly and how big the corn was. And I was like, this ground is very much like yours. We should get out of the cab and go searching around there on the ground and see what you find. Anyways.
There was nothing there. As I mentioned earlier, like the worms ate everything off the top. And that was a field that Steve told me to just plant it. And I planted through a standing hay field about that tall, like 2 feet tall.
Were you nervous?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I think I was dumb? Yeah. Could I pull it up the hill? No. Did I pick up the planter, turn around, drive down the hill? Yeah. All non-GPS, so it was a big mess. But corn looked a little ugly, but the aha came in the fall. Because part of that field had a little bit of tillage and little corners, little job. In the fall, as bad as some of that corn looked through the growing season, and Steve taking the time to come out and look, and in the fall, when chopping that corn looked amazing. That corn was cleaner, healthier, taller than what was tilled. The part that was tilled actually had a poorer plant stand and was 6 inches shorter and brown.
Wow.
And that was and the ground was licked clean. And we had put too much manure on it because it was the only field that was close to the barn. And you take a guess at it, and we were out there with 2 spreaders and got it way too heavy, and it was all gone. The only thing I found back was a lump, one somewhere. So obviously it was too much for the worms to clean up. But they had cleaned up probably close to 25, 30 tons to the acre manure, fresh, and all the crop residue that was knee-high. But that was a hay field that would have been in hay for 3-4 years. So it had lots of worm activity already. They were there looking for something to eat. It had food. So now we try to farm, as Steve was saying, he's learning about the livestock under the ground.
Right.
It's been, my model for a few years has been roots, not iron, but now I think it's more, we got to look after feeding those worms to eat those roots to feed our crop.
I think an aha moment is like as much as we like standardized approaches, is sometimes not standardized. It's not that we need to lose sleep if you need to till a field if it makes it better,
Right.
or to alleviate small time problems. Like if you create compaction, you're going to be better off with iron to go remove it and get you back, put your cover crop back in and get back on track. So I feel like some of the aha moments are, not as much as we want to standardize, but not standardize or not lose sleep when you have to change something up, because it's okay.
Interesting.
Oh, our biggest aha moment, I think, was after a lecture from Greg Judy. He's a mob grazer from the States.
Okay.
He introduced us to mob grazing at the Acres USA conference. And I thought, well, let's give it a try. We started it and we never looked back. It's fantastic. So
Mob grazing, is that with like so many pounds per acre and moving them fast, or what's the idea?
in the spring, so we actually did our dry cow. For milking cows, it didn't really work that well, but for a little bit. But for dry cows and heifers, we put them in a small field and move them three times a day. And so start at half May and you go to half July, and the last stuff will be yay high. And they flatten it all out. So it probably only eats 40% of it. So that I remember the first year my dad was over and we did it, and he said, they got Dutch, and he didn't have any land in Holland, so every little corner or every grass would always be raked up, and he saw what we did, and he said, I'm not sure if that's a good idea. Say, for example, look at them bales per acre. Say you have a really good hay field, and you got 8 bales an acre, which is really good. But then, so that would be, we normally go by kilos dry matter. So if you have 8 bales an acre, it would be 2,000 kilos dry matter per acre. Wouldn't it be fantastic? And then you consider then that you trample more in half. So that will be 4 bales an acre is the ton of cotton. You trample half of your crop down, and you think, it's a good idea. But on the end of the year, you add all your numbers up, and you will come to the conclusion that yields just as good as a hay field by mob grazing properly. So that was a really aha moment, and you can graze longer. Like the heifers and dry cows are still outside, and it's end of November. So, wow. Because you create a mat, so you protect the soil for overheating, and that the new grass will come through it. If you do have a rain, it doesn't dry out right away again. And yeah, it's amazing how well this soil. And then by that time, when that grazing is done, we do it in the fourth year of 4th or 5th year of a hayfield, and then we plow it up with a regular moldboard plow, which most guys put away. But anyway, but that's only we plow as late as possible, right? Because there's lots of activity in the soil. There's lots of roots. It's not ideal, but we never see washouts in a plow field. If there's that much root mass in there, it does not. It's not ideal, but it's pretty idiot-proof corn. I can tell you that part. Like, it doesn't need nitrogen. It doesn't need spraying. Like, you only cultivate once. You time meter, then cultivate once, and it's. Well, you guys saw. It was nice corn. There's not a lot of weeds in there, but like, if you look at the other perspective, you do a liquid manure in the spring. Then my brother is in liquid is also organic. There's a liquid manure. That takes a good timing of your weed control, like time weed twice, cultivate 3 times, and a decent weed pressure.
Why is that?
Liquid.
Yeah, no, what's in that coming out doing that? Just making a flush of weeds come up?
Yep.
Because there's an exit.
You feed them.
Okay.
Yeah. There's lots of seeds there.
But lots of seeds in yours too.
Yeah.
Say,
But it's stimulating, right?
it's different. Okay. Yep, fair enough.
So that's the thing you tell why weeds grow.
Yeah. All the weeds grow for a reason.
Well, yes and no, but they will grow for a reason. That like Glenn mentioned to the calcium thing. He actually was very inspiring. We bought a lot of stuff from him too. I'm still not sure, but it was extremely good stuff. But he did trigger us the mindset of high calcium and high sugar content in your plants. And yeah, our soil tests do not test great, and yet our hay tests do test good. So there is something to the soil. Sometimes you wonder, should I still soil test? I don't know. If your hay test shows you have everything in there, like our soils are low in phosphorus, so we try to do buckwheat after and try to stimulate mycorrhizal fungi to get the phosphorus up. And we have not seen low phosphorus counts in our hay. And I've seen fields with really, really high phosphorus, and the hay test shows low phosphorus. So there's so much to learn. Like, there's so much to learn. You can do a simple soil test, but your hay basically tells you what's going on. Like, if your hay test shows there's low phosphorus, and your soil test shows high phosphorus, what went wrong? Something went wrong.
Yeah, it's not getting into the plant.
It does not get in. But there is something going on.
A little more outcome oriented.
So yeah,
what is your end product?
Yeah. So our hay test does give us the most information, and I've never seen a hay test high in potash. Low in potash. Sorry.
So what? I bought a farm a number of years ago right next to Lammert, and I was mowing a very remarkable hay crop on this one field, and this farm has tested very low on a soil test. So the conventional soil, the blanket name right here, sorry. The CCA crop consultant told me I got to put a build program on, put some extra fertilizer on there to build it up because soil test for phosphorus and potassium was low. I'm mowing this crop that's well over my waist, and lo and behold, Lammert zips over in his bike one day and watch it. He said, "That is some hay crop." I said, "Yeah, I know. I don't know what it's growing on because the soil test is next to nothing." And he left me with a comment that he probably doesn't even remember, but he says, "Really shows that your soil test is really proving in results, right? Like, you'd really need a high testing soil test to get good crops." I guess maybe it's more how the crop responds to something. Now, when listening more recently, it's what's getting into the plant that is more important. So, like, what is your analysis of the plant? Going back to your either feed test is one way of looking at it. Where we tried some this year, some sap testing, and it's what's gotten into the plant. So you can have a low testing soil sample, but the microbe community is there. What is there is getting cycled. So it's being released and uptaken by that crop every year, versus you can have a high testing one, but it stays high testing because it's not getting into your plant.
Yeah, if you have the ideas, if you have healthy biological populations, when your plant signals it wants phosphorus, your soil micro community can go fetch it for it. It might not come in the soil test, but that's when it needs it. And I've heard lots of times lately from different people I listen to is that you cannot buy your way into phosphorus availability. You have to earn your way to phosphorus availability.
So adding more phosphorus isn't going to...
No, because a complex is really fast in environment. It might help it for the first week or 2 or 3. I think up to 6 weeks you can get, but then it's complexed. And some of the argument is that if you can't stimulate root colony structure like right away off the hop, then when the plant needs it down the road through grain fill and whatever else it needs to do, it has to then try to colonize on the roots, which is a much more uphill battle for it. So I think that's where it comes into play, where you can't buy your way into phosphorus availability. That's well said. I just repeated it.
Before we drift off back, Steve, I'd like to hear about your aha moment, or a aha moment.
My aha moment was listening at Soil Smart, listening to Ray Archuleta back in 2012, I think it was.
So those who would know at home, who in theory, people who don't know about Ray Archuleta.
He's a soil scientist from down southern states.
Okay.
And about trying to mimic the forest intercropping system with living roots in the soil year round. And I think the light bulb went off because we've always been told, and I always knew my best corn crop was after hay. And we were always told that's because of the nitrogen and the bacteria in the soil feeding. And it's like, no, it's not. It's because we've had living roots in that soil for 3 years continuously over winter and everything. It's like we just mimic the forest in our cornfield after hay. It's like, okay, we need to mimic that. And that's when I started doing more cover cropping after wheat and even after corn, and spread. Well, I think right after Ray spoke in February, and I went out and spread cereal rye in March, and it worked. I had better residue breakdown of my corn stalk, planting soybeans into that in late May. So I'll spread rye any month of the year over the winter, from October to March if it takes that. But that was my biggest aha moment. Love that.
It's interesting. I remember listening to Ray Archuleta at that point, because I was at that Farm Smart, but it just kind of went, like, that's great, but I don't know how to maybe put it into practice as much. But I have, in the back of my mind, pulled from that now that we've been working on infiltration rates and that, because I seen that time, but that was a long time back. But yeah, it's interesting how something you see, something you're told, something you hear, sometimes takes a while before you act on it. And I know a lot of that comes from Lammert telling us over the years some things.
Yeah.
And as now we're we're kind of you organic people, and there you go. And now we've been listening to podcasts now, and Lammert just goes, yeah, I know. We've been doing that for 20 years. Like, come on. Okay. What else can you tell us?
You say sorry.
Yeah.
Can you please tell me more now?
Yeah, can you please tell me again?
Can you repeat the whole 10?
It was really interesting. Like, not unless all pieces of the puzzle. Like, for Steve, that was an aha moment because he had the certain pieces in place that allow him to make that next choice. And same with each of your aha moments. But by coming together, you can take all your scattered pieces and help each other in a way that maybe you wouldn't be able to otherwise. What I'd like to dive into are more of a question for farmers out there, or people who maybe don't have individuals who have the different puzzle pieces, or don't have that, the community that you guys have worked to foster here. Are there any words of advice that you guys would give people who are, looking to maybe leave their own little bubble and reach out to people in their community, learn from those around them, learn from their neighbors?
Go to a conference.
Yeah.
Together. With a bunch of neighbors. Yeah. It's fun. You listen to good speakers, but we go to acres. This is fun.
Yeah, I think
And the farther away, the better, because the longer you sit in the car and you hang out and drink coffee. And you can share a lot of information, and on your way back, you listen to all these speakers and you share the information. But going away is probably, but
I'd almost go the other way.
Interesting.
Go to a conference, but meet people from a long ways away. Because then you can talk about stuff, and you're not competing with them over a farm, or they're going to steal your idea. You can let them try their idea too, 150 miles away.
Yeah. We visit 5 farms when we go there. As we would drive up, we visit a couple farms, and then we would drive back, visit a couple farms.
Are you guys going to Alblas this week?
Yeah. You want to go?
I was thinking about it. I looked into it, but
So we go to a couple dairy farms and a couple of cash purpose because it's a bunch of guys.
Yep. I've got a few guys that I always talk to daily and just, hey, that's a good idea, but we're not competing against each other. We'll share intimate ideas that if you share it with your neighbor, or a piece of equipment or a farm price or whatever, but you can talk about that stuff with guys that are never going to be in your neighborhood.
Interesting.
I think a little bit for myself has been maybe even a little different than Steve is I see us farmers as better collaborators than competitors. You're far better off collaborating over something. And if the next farm for sale happens to be closer to your neighbor, don't be upset if he buys it. But even though you might need some land, but I know it's a competition, and there is a point of competition it's necessary or in the industry. But I think we have far better to gain by being collaborative and share a little bit back and forth than worrying about every dime making money one way or the other, so to speak. But going back to your question about someone who looking to reach out, a lot of farmers are fairly willing to share. Just go look around your neighborhood and see somebody you think is doing a really good job, and don't be afraid to ask them. You got to know already, so if the least you can get is probably some information, and you never know. Like, we're a group of farmers. We have organic farmers in here. We got 3 dairy farms, and Steve is into the cash crop, and I say there's enough information goes back and forth that we can all utilize, maybe not all perfectly. Like, it's not contextual the same, but there's a bit of advice can go either way.
Yeah, a little bit of both.
Yeah.
You guys listen to a lot of podcasts, right?
Not as much.
I listen to way too many.
So that helped you too, right?
I've listened to all the time. I listen to everybody I possibly can now, so I can get confused.
And I've never listened to any.
Really?
No.
What do you listen to in the cab then?
I listen to what's going on.
Oh, I listen to it like when I'm feeding in the morning. It's a pretty easy job. I try to do the math in my head, so I don't need my calculator, and then I have to upset the YouTube because it can't go while you close the app down.
I got paid for premiums for that. And I want to hear your thoughts before we move on.
On what?
We already got that far away from that.
Yeah, I just
No, you mentioned how you can
yeah, like when it comes to like health
conference.
conferences, is there anything else you'd like to add, or
He does a lot of podcasts, and I don't have any to add.
I think people, like what Gord said, people are willing to help. It's sometimes hard to get out and ask the question, and like I'm terrible for being in my comfort zone and like trying to break the comfort zone, and I've actually been trying to work on that a bit, but so it's hard to just break out of that comfort zone and just ask one question. Once you get it out of your mouth, everything else goes better.
Yeah.
Because people will help you, and then it feeds and it goes good. So,
Yeah. I always want to challenge people to try something. Because like we said, quite often in the organic business, people seen as tree huggers maybe. But you know what? What's the big deal if you have a hay field and you have it 4 years in hay? Just plow it in September and put some O's in there and just try a field of corn. Like, how big of a deal is it? Like, it's not a big deal. Just try it and say, does it work? All right, maybe in 10 years or maybe in 5 years. Just try it. You'll be surprised.
one thing too, like for trying new things, is that we need sustainability on all levels, like we talked about. Like, you need to be profitable so you can try again next year. But some of these things are not should be only yield based. Like, and as time goes on, like, we need to consider, we need to stay profitable. We also need to be long-term sustainable, which is a bit of isn't always factored in. And I'm a pretty firm believer, like when I was like in my 20s, our dairy, like, I don't do high production, and it's fine for people who do. I have no issue with it, but I am quite confident that low 30s is just as profitable or more. And so challenging the status quo is a hard thing to do sometimes, because we're always pushed by people on to be like, more, the best, the highest is the best, but it's not necessarily the case. And I think oftentimes you'll find out you might get a different answer. I think there's somewhat the same in the cropping system. I don't think highest yield necessarily means highest ROI, along with the farm or in the barn and probably most other things that follow along. I think it's hard to find those answers, and that's where it is handy with people you can talk to or seek out people. But don't be ashamed if your result isn't going to get you a medal. it could be pretty inspiring to anybody.
Excellent. Well, speaking of inspiring, you guys have been so generous with your time. I don't want to take up much more of it, but before we finish off, I want to give each of you the opportunity to share either personal musing, what you guys have going on with your life, anything that you want other farmers out there to know. It's completely up to you. I think it could be something, some words to inspire. It could be some words of wisdom. But I'd like to give each of you just a little moment in the spotlight. Steve, why don't we start with you?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is I'm going to try and delve deeper. I'm getting older. My kids are coming along. I'm trying to inspire them to do something different. And part of me is backing off and wanting them to, okay, you guys start learning the next new thing that we're going to do. But I think I'm going to Stratford with these two the end of the week to learn a little bit more about looking at the calcium and the boron and all those micronutrients and the interactions with the soil. How do we make that livestock below the ground work for us without feeding them, like biophosphorus and biopotash? How do we make that soil work for us while making the soil better for the next generation? And that's a little bit out of my comfort zone, I guess, in that I'm going to get more scientific in my old age.
Let's go to the molecular level now.
Yeah.
That's good. It's an interesting pivot, but I like it. Gordon.
Yeah, I think I'm really like to focus on keeping some of the money on the farm. I started realizing how much we write to checks to all these big companies, and not that they're all so bad. I think, and I don't believe the people working for them are so bad either. We've been schooled that way. I was schooled that way. You put this, and this on your crop. You put that on, and you get that. I question a little bit more. Maybe I don't need to put as much of this, and that. Maybe there's something I can brew on farm. Maybe there's something I can utilize better that I'm already applying, my manure, so to speak. Maybe there's a crop rotation that's a little different. Maybe there's a timing. We're trying a bunch of things. It's always best to try them by the rows, and the neighbors got some input. But I think going forward, it's continue trying and stepping out of that comfort zone of, always been told, put this, and this on, and being able to stand up to the salesman who's coming in the door and wanting to sell you what he sold you last year and say, well, this year we're going to try and back it off a little bit. Well, why? Well, I've been trying a little strip. We've been trying that a little bit. This is the way we're going to move forward and be willing to fail. Fail is a good training too.
As long as you don't make the same, or you hope to not make the same mistake. Try not to make it, but stuff happens.
Well, I think you should be amazed by God's creation and think about his creation and how complex everything is and how you can influence that, and be amazed how much nature actually can do. Like, if you have a field, one part of the field would give you 80 bushels of beans and the rest does 50 bushels, they say, what is going on in those 80 parts? So if that one part of the field can do 80 bushels, the rest should be able to do that too. Try to investigate what triggers that and make it all like that. Same as in our barn. Like, for quite a few years, we have been feeding no grain at all. And then you have a cow who can get 11,000 liters from just corn silage. Hey, ladies, if one cow can do that, probably more cows could do that. So there's always a different level, and that's amazing. Try to get them to a higher level.
It's a really good way of looking at it. And last but not least, Doug.
I'm going to try to remember. So I think what Lammert said is very true, and I think I have kind of the same idea a little bit. You have to sometimes stop and watch nature, because nature's like very, very perfected, and it works really well. But sometimes I think we can observe, we have to stop to observe the beauty of it, because there is a lot of answers there. I have listened to a lot of podcasts, different people, everything. After not getting some results I was hoping for this year, I started looking at everyone, because I'm like, got to be more to it. And going back to this calcium link a bit, I think my goals next year are going to go a little bit on that, but I think there is some kind of link there. So if anyone is wanting to start the soil health, maybe just we'll fast forward you a bit and consider that right off the hop, or looking into that a little harder, because that's what we should do with Lammert. Should listen to him.
That's a good one about fast track and looking at calcium right off the hop. It's sort of like no-tills. With all the no-till steep learning curve I've done, all the no-till equipment I bought, and now it's in the back corner of the shed sitting on the floor, because put it on the planter or put it on a piece of tillage equipment, then you take it off.
Yeah.
Talk to lots of other people firsthand before you open your wallet, because you'll save a bunch.
The calcium is from a biophysics and biochemical standpoint. Like it's like every angle goes to calcium. That's why I'm saying just cut to the chase and go right to that. That's not all of that. It's a helping start.
I guess maybe this shift's been earlier common, but I got selected to be part of the soil network, which I never even heard of before Steve told me I should be part of it. That one year that he just put the planner to his note. Steve goes, "You should be part of the soil network." I said, "What's the soil network?"
Yeah, for those who don't know what is this?
Yeah, soil network is a group of farmers that there is really no structure to it. It's there's a little bit of training they'll give you on year one, but it's just a group of farmers that have a opportunity to share ideas. We get together sometimes, but there's a group chat. Basically, it's being soil champions in your local community is really what they want to foster, and you have contacts. So there was a fellow that we met there that was on actually turf grass business, and he's very keen on a biological way of making your lawns green. He's not having a lot of success in people adopting it, but he's having a lot of success with his products. So he looks after a couple of sports fields down in St. Catharines, right? And he shared some photos of many dandelions and light green grass right to the line of where they normally apply. And like, if it grows grass good, it grows a lot of other things good, right? So you start listening to him. And that actually led Doug and I to listen to him a little bit more. And I don't think he's always was appreciated as much as he needed to be on the soil network. Again, like we did with Lammert, maybe pushed it aside a little bit. Too good to be true, right? In a way, like just put a couple of microbes on the ground. What do you mean by that? But we took him a little more seriously this past year. And even a year or so ago, he came out to the farm and was digging in Doug's field with him, and we were looking at what was under the ground, because it's quite interesting. And just those connections would not have been made through the soil network. So Doug's not on the soil network yet. We're working on that. But it kept Steve to push me to be part of the soil network, which I kind of half took somebody seriously, but not totally seriously. But I thought maybe there could be something there. Introduced him to another neighbor. We kind of together. It took us a couple of years. Are we perfecting it yet? Not at all. But we picked up the phone and talked to him for advice how to make a on-farm product to apply to the land. Well, both of us have something called a Johnson Sioux that's a year old that we made. We each made one. It's sitting mine's sitting in the shed here. Our plan is to extract it and put it on next spring. So that's all stuff we would not have had. First of all, the idea to start with, and second of all, maybe not the seeing is a lot easier to go ahead and start the next right when you see it. You can pick up that Johnson Sioux that's completed and go, wow, that is really nice. How can I make this and use it? And then you have somebody to contact to get the ball rolling, so to speak, to get you building that first Johnson Sioux battery, to get it made. Say, hey, do I need to mulch them? What do I need to do with them, this way or that way? And then just enough to push you in there. Well, now you realize it's so easy that you could have been just get stuff in there, away we go, kind of deal. But
Sometimes, the thing I was going to say, sometimes change is hard, but it's good to accept change a bit. We're used to farming the way we do right now, but farming has changed a lot in 10 years to where we come. But if we have to understand that it's handy or good to be open to these new ideas, or like with anything, because markets will change again. Like in 20 years, we'll probably farm with a very different context depending on markets, or everything changes. Our age changes. Like we just have to get more used to dealing with change. So I think as time goes on, it's good to be open and accept change a bit more, or it's one thing to work on, because the only we're guaranteed is that it's going to be different as every cropping year goes.
I would say healthy soil will bring healthy crops, will bring healthy people, and I think it's very important for us as keepers of the soil. Farmers have a really important task, and soil is one of them, and protecting water. Farming is a pretty important business.
I can't think of a better line to end it on.
Well, that's a wrap from here in Brant County. Big thanks to Steve, Gord, Doug, and Lammert, who shared their stories and hard-earned lessons about farming smarter and building healthier soils. If there's one thing we've learned today, it's that improving your soil health isn't just about what you grow, it's about how you grow it. If something you've heard today sparked an idea or made you think differently about your own farm, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out, share your stories, and let's keep this conversation going. Remember, we're all connected by the soil beneath our feet, and every step we take towards healthier soil is a step towards a stronger future for all of us. Thank you for tuning into the Soil Network. Until next time, stay rooted, stay resilient, and keep digging deeper.